He said it in front of 30 people. From now on, no more luxury retreats disguised as compliance trips. And just like that, 17 years of work got reduced to a punchline. People laughed, not because it was funny, because they didn't want to be next. I just sat there, spine straight, hands folded. My name wasn't even mentioned, but the implication landed like a slap. The annual Denver trip, my trip the one I'd managed, prepared, and executed with military precision, was now a retired expense. Apparently, legal operations across 4 states didn't justify a flight anymore. Ethan Vance had been our new director for less than 2 weeks, fresh out of corporate HQ. Clean haircut, cleaner spreadsheets, zero knowledge of what kept this place from falling apart. He smiled as he clicked through his slides, bragging about eliminating redundancies while tossing aside the only system we had that worked. And me, I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I just watched him, because I knew something he didn't. Before I tell you what happened next, where are you listening from today? Have you ever been in a room where your worth was erased with a single sentence? If you have, or if this hit a little too close to home, leave a comment. Your story might help someone else feel a little less alone. The next morning, I logged into our internal system as I always did. Audit logs, regulatory calendar, renewal task list. Except everything was different. My access had been revoked. No warning, no explanation, just a quiet, invisible lockout. The folders I built were still there. The documents I'd curated over years still intact, but I couldn't touch them anymore. It was like watching someone rearrange your childhood bedroom, then padlock the door. Later that day, the memo came in. Ethan's official delegation note. All regulatory coordination for the Denver licensing process will now be managed by my assistant, Jesse Moore. Jesse, fresh out of college, barely 2 weeks into the job, bright smile, loud keyboard, no idea what a regulatory clause even meant. She once asked me if Colorado had different taxes because of the altitude. I told her to stick with decaf. And now she was in charge of compliance. There was no meeting, no handover, just a CC'd email and a polite smile from across the room. I said nothing, because silence can be mistaken for surrender, but sometimes it's preparation. I walked back to my desk, opened a fresh notebook, and wrote one word across the first page. Observe. That afternoon, Jessie stopped by. "Hey, Rachel," she said with the breezy tone of someone who'd never seen a real audit. "Ethan said you'd send me the Denver stuff, the contacts forms, whatever's important." I looked up, met her eyes, and smiled. "Sure," I said. "I'll get that to you by end of day." And I did. Everything clean, organized, time-stamped. No attitude, no warnings. Because when someone insists on holding the wheel, the least you can do is let them drive, even if the road ahead has no guardrails. That night, I stayed at the office later than usual. Not to finish work, at least not the kind they cared about anymore. I wasn't included in the meetings, and my name had quietly disappeared from the planning threads. But I still had something they didn't, memory. So I began the slow, deliberate process of backing everything up. Every license renewal, every email chain, every phone log, internal memo, and audit summary I'd personally written. I archived it all on a flash drive, encrypted, labeled in handwriting only I could read. Then I made a second copy. Because systems fail. People forget. But I don't. I taped the first drive underneath my desk drawer, right beside a pack of gum I hadn't touched in years. The second went home with me, tucked into an old eyeglass case, something no one would ever bother to open. Call it paranoia, call it instinct. But after almost 2 decades in compliance, I've learned one truth. The moment you stop preparing for collapse is the moment it begins. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I just didn't trust a system run by people who thought compliance was a checkbox on a spreadsheet. And Ethan, he thought I was part of the problem. Legacy. Expired. Replaceable. Jessie hadn't even replied to my email. I'd sent everything she needed. Clean, organized, ready to go. And still nothing. I didn't chase her. I just noted the silence. Every time they skipped a step, ignored a protocol, or passed the buck, I documented it. They were building a tower on sand, and I wasn't going to stop them. I was just going to be there when it started to crack. The next morning, I printed out a fresh compliance calendar just for me. I circled one date in red ink, not to remind them, to remind myself, because something told me they wouldn't see the deadline until it was far too late. June 2nd. That was the day the email came in. Subject line, license renewal, urgent action required. It was from the Colorado Department of Regulatory Affairs. Polite, precise, and terrifying in its clarity. The deadline was June 14th, 12 days. No extensions, no exceptions, no reminders. The message had gone to Jesse. I was copied barely, probably because some old contact sheet still had my name listed as a fallback. That's the only reason I saw it. I stared at the screen for a full minute. The PDF was attached. Same as every year, updated forms, compliance checklist, signature requirements. Nothing had changed except the hands now holding the responsibility. I checked Jesse's status. Out of office, back June 10th, limited email access. There was a palm tree emoji and a link to her Instagram in her email footer. Out of curiosity, I clicked. Photos from Tulum, sunsets, cocktails, a hammock with a caption that read, "No shoes, no schedule, no stress." I wanted to laugh. But instead, I just closed the tab and returned to my inbox. I didn't forward the email, didn't reply, didn't remind anyone. I wasn't in charge anymore. I had followed Ethan's delegation memo to the letter. I had handed over the documentation, and now I was just another name on a CC line, technically uninvolved, functionally invisible. So I did what I always do when something feels off. I circled the deadline on my private calendar twice, then I added a second alert, and a third. Because when you've done this job long enough, you start to hear the ticking before the bomb ever goes off. And this wasn't just a missed email. This was the sound of a system winding down, and no one realizing they were already out of time. June 15th came and went. No alerts, no follow-ups, no, "Hey, did we submit the paperwork from Jesse?" And Ethan? He was too busy floating from one strategy meeting to another, spouting buzzwords like optimization and agile workflows. No one noticed the silence, except me. The license had officially expired at midnight the night before. I knew what that meant. It wasn't theoretical. I'd seen what happens when a regional compliance certificate lapses even for a day. Vendors panic, shipping halts, customs flags your entire operation for suspicion of illegitimacy, and then the fees start rolling in. But there was no fire alarm, no blinking red light, just a normal Tuesday morning. Jessie returned from vacation with a tan and a smoothie. She passed by my desk with a cheerful, "Morning." I nodded. She had no idea. I checked the portal out of habit. The login screen redirected to a locked status page. Account suspended. Renewal window closed. I read it twice just to make sure. I could have forwarded it. I could have walked into Ethan's office with a printout and said, "Hey, we have a problem." But I didn't, because that wasn't my job anymore. And more importantly, they didn't want it to be. I was the relic, the outdated system they'd proudly streamlined. So I went back to my desk, opened my private folder, and made another backup, this time with a fresh timestamp, a little insurance, just in case. The rest of the day was quiet, too quiet. But around 4:17 p.m., a message popped up in the Denver office group chat. Anyone else locked out of the licensing portal can't finalize Q3 shipment docs. Another message. Customs just flagged 2 crates, both perishable. Says our certification is invalid. No reply from Jesse, no reply from Ethan. I sat still watching the thread, and I thought, the cracks have started. By Wednesday morning, the group chat wasn't just active, it was on fire. Denver had gone dark. Their export dashboard was locked. The Q3 shipment, $240,000 worth of refrigerated medical inventory, was being held at the state border awaiting documentation no one could provide. I watched the messages pour in. Operations, logistics, even legal. Everyone asking the same thing in slightly different ways. Has anyone filed the renewal? Why isn't the system recognizing our license? Was there a change in responsibility no one knew about? No one tagged me, not yet. But I could feel their eyes drifting slowly, silently, in my direction. I kept typing my notes. Calm. Even. Ethan, of course, jumped in eventually, trying to stay composed. Probably just a portal caching issue. Jesse, can you follow up with IT? Jesse didn't answer. Someone tried calling the state office. No one picked up. It was lunchtime in Colorado. Another message came in, this time from Phoenix. Heads up, our license is tied to Denver. Our interface is down now too. Then Salt Lake chimed in. Client access suspended. We're getting flagged on every API call. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. It had begun. Not the dramatic collapse Ethan probably imagined if he ever thought about failure. No explosions, no angry meetings, just quiet breakdown. One failed login at a time, one shipment held, one regulation ignored. And as each piece buckled under the weight of neglect, I felt something shift in a room. Not panic, not yet, but unease. Like the hum before a storm, when the birds go quiet and even the air feels like it's holding its breath. I glanced at the clock. 9:41 a.m. They still had no idea what was really broken, and no clue that this was only the beginning. Friday morning came with donuts in the break room and dread in the air. The quarterly town hall was scheduled for 10 a.m., and like always, it was mandatory. Slide decks, budget wins, project updates, an hour of polished nothingness dressed up in bullet points and corporate jargon. I took my seat in the back, as usual, quiet, unassuming. Just another compliance ghost in a sea of analysts and marketers. Ethan walked in 5 minutes late, carrying his signature iced Americano and that smug air of overconfidence he always wore like cologne. He clicked the remote, and the presentation lit up on the big screen. Q2 cost optimization results. He smiled. This quarter, we successfully streamlined multiple redundant workflows, including unnecessary travel expenditures. I knew where this was going. Slide 6, a cartoon airplane icon with a rad X through it. Next to it, bold text, eliminated legacy licensing trips. Projected savings $42,000 per year. Then he said it. For example, our old Denver licensing visits have now been fully digitized. No more flights, no more hotels, no more steak dinners on the company dime. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the room. I didn't laugh, I didn't flinch, because that line, that joke, wasn't just tone deaf, it was dangerous. The license had already expired. The shipments were already delayed. Multiple systems were failing silently in the background while Ethan played budget hero under the spotlight. I sat there, pen tapping lightly against my notepad, not writing anything, just listening, waiting. I could feel a few glances shift toward me. Nobody said it out loud, but something in the air had changed. The laughter was shorter, uneven, like people weren't sure if it was okay to keep smiling. And then Ethan said, almost offhand, of course, credit to Jessie for handling the new process. She's been fantastic. I looked down at my notepad. The red circle around June 14th stared back at me like a countdown clock. And in that moment, I knew the show was almost over. The curtain hadn't dropped yet, but the audience was starting to sense something was wrong. By Monday morning, the cracks had turned into fault lines. Emails were piling up, some marked urgent, some marked follow-up needed. Denver was still offline. Phoenix had reported a second shipment flagged, and now Salt Lake's client dashboard was returning access errors. Still, no one used the word crisis, not yet. In the main hallway, I overheard Ethan on a call. His voice was tight but controlled. It's a minor back-end hiccup, probably an integration issue. Our IT team's already looking into it. He was lying. Or maybe he genuinely didn't understand what was happening. That made it worse. Jessie came in late that day carrying a green juice and looking more exhausted than refreshed. She paused by my desk. Hey, Rachel, did you happen to see anything weird with the licensing system last week? I met her eyes and gave a soft smile. I'm not part of that process anymore, remember? She blinked, then nodded. Right, yeah, sorry, just wondering. She walked away before I could say more. Across the floor, the atmosphere had shifted. People weren't chatting in the break room, they were whispering, watching. Someone from logistics muttered, "Didn't Rachel used to handle all of this?" Another voice, softer, replied, "She did, until Ethan took it from her." I didn't turn around, I just kept typing. That afternoon, I got a ping from the director of regional sales. One line, "Can you jump into a call real quick about Denver?" I ignored it. A few minutes later, another message came through. This one from Ethan's executive assistant. "Ethan would like to speak with you privately. He's asking if you're available now." I looked at the screen. I didn't answer right away. I stood up, straightened my blouse, and walked slowly to the glass conference room where I saw Ethan pacing inside, jaw tight, hand clenching his phone like it owed him answers. He saw me. His expression softened slightly, but the panic behind his eyes was impossible to miss. I opened the door. "Rachel," he said, "we need your help." And in that moment, I realized he finally knew. Not what was broken, but who had been holding everything together. I didn't sit right away. Instead, I closed the glass door behind me and stood for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Ethan had that look like a man trying to pretend the building wasn't already on fire. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Rachel, look, I think we may have missed something. There's some confusion about when the Denver renewal was due. Jessie said she never got the email, and now legal's asking for a full breakdown." I tilted my head slightly. "You need a timeline?" He nodded. "Yes, if you have one, just to clarify things. Nothing formal." I pulled out my personal laptop. I didn't rush, I didn't speak. I just opened the folder I'd labeled months ago, Denver 2024, Decommissioned Chain. Click. The document opened. Table format, color-coded, dated, backed with receipts. I turned the screen toward him and pushed it gently across the table. His eyes dropped to the first entry. March 2, directive issued by Ethan Vance. All licensing responsibility transferred to Jessie Moore. He kept reading. March 3, compliance archive forwarded to Jessie. Request for confirmation. No reply. June 2, regulatory agency sends deadline reminder. Jessie is primary recipient. Rachel Myers CC'd. June 14th, deadline passes. License expires at midnight. June 17th, Denver systems begin to lock out. June 21, first shipment flagged. June 24, CRM failure reported across Phoenix and Salt Lake. Ethan didn't say a word. He just scrolled and scrolled. Everything was there. Emails, attachments, Slack messages, calendar entries. His own memo signed, dated, and distributed to over a dozen people. He finally looked up. Did you save all of this on your own?" I gave a small shrug. "I document everything. Old habit." He leaned back slowly. The air felt heavier now. No one yelled, no one cried, but the truth had weight, and I had just placed it squarely in his lap. Outside the conference room, I could see the VP of sales pacing on the phone. Another shipment, maybe. Another missed call. Another consequence. And something told me this wasn't over yet. It started with a phone call. Not to me, of course. To the CEO. It came from our largest client in the Pacific Northwest, one of the few who had weathered every quarterly shakeup and still signed on year after year. Except now they couldn't log into their platform, couldn't complete transactions, couldn't move forward with orders totaling nearly $2 million because our license was invalid. And when the CEO asked why, he was told flatly, factually, that the Denver regional certification had expired 12 days ago. That's when the door to the boardroom swung open. I wasn't in that meeting, but I didn't need to be. You can hear the change in an office when things break for real. It's not loud, it's quiet. No laughter, no keyboards, no pacing feet. Just breath, held, waiting. Then came the walk. the one no one wants to take. Ethan's shoulders stiff, face pale, stepped out of the boardroom and crossed the floor like he was heading toward a verdict. His badge was still clipped to his belt, but everyone knew. You don't come out of a CEO meeting holding nothing but your phone unless something's already been decided. He passed me without a word, didn't make eye contact, didn't try to explain. And I didn't need him to, because this was never about revenge. Not really. This was about consequence. And now the system he built on half-understood processes and hollow optimism was collapsing under its own weight. I glanced at my inbox. 3 new messages. One from legal, one from HR, and one from the CEO's assistant. He'd like to speak with you privately, today if possible. I leaned back in my chair. The office was still like a paused movie. Somewhere behind me, Jessie was softly crying into her desk. And in front of me was a conversation I had been waiting months to have. The CEO's office was quiet when I entered. Not the usual corporate quiet filled with keystrokes and background chatter. No, this was the kind of silence that follows impact. The kind that lingers after numbers break things no apology can fix. He didn't offer a seat right away, just looked up from the stack of papers on his desk and said, "Thank you for coming." I nodded. I didn't smile. He gestured to the chair. I sat. There was no speech, no spin, just a folder, closed, thick. He pushed it across the desk toward me. "It's a revised offer," he said. "Restoration of your role, retroactive compensation, a direct report position under executive operations." He paused, looked down for a second, and a formal apology, on paper. I didn't touch the folder, because here's the thing about validation: when it arrives too late, it no longer feels like recognition. It feels like cleanup. He cleared his throat. "We know we made a mistake. Ethan's departure was necessary, but I'd like to ask you to stay. Help rebuild what we almost lost." I reached into my bag, pulled out a slim envelope, sealed, already signed. I placed it gently on top of the folder. "That's my resignation." He blinked. Once. No anger, just regret. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "No, I'm sorry it had to cost you this much to see it." He nodded slowly. There was nothing left to argue. As I stood, I glanced one last time around the office that had once felt like mine, but that version of it was gone, and so was I. When I opened the door to leave, the light felt different, brighter. Not because the office had changed, but because I finally had. And waiting on my desk was one final folder. Not company property, personal. I left the building with a single box. 1 mug, 2 folders, and a flash drive labeled insurance. No send-off, no applause. Just a few quiet nods from people who had finally started connecting the dots. Jessie never spoke to me again. Last I heard, she was transferred to a back-office support role in a different region. I don't blame her. She was thrown into something way over her head. It wasn't malice. It was neglect. Hers and mostly Ethan's. And Ethan? Well, they called it administrative leave, but everyone knew it was just a polite way of saying, "We can't afford to keep you here anymore." The company survived. Barely. The fine was public, so was the apology. But what people forget is reputation doesn't always recover with a press release. As for me, I booked a one-way flight to Denver. Not for licensing, not for work. For me. I walked the streets I used to rush through on business trips, sat in a tiny cafe I never had time to enjoy before, and for the first time in years, I didn't check my email between sips of coffee, because I had nothing to prove anymore. Not to them, and not to myself. Funny thing is, when you stop fighting to be seen, you realize you were never invisible, just underestimated. And sometimes, the best form of justice is walking away with your head high while the building behind you tries to fix what they broke. That's not revenge. That's peace. But now I wonder, if you were in my shoes, would you have stayed and rebuilt, or would you have walked away too? Tell me in the comments. Someone else might be facing the same decision right now, and your story could help them choose.